All right. How's it going, everybody? Back again at Hotline Sehwani. Today we have a special guest continuing in our voice acting series. Go on and introduce yourself. He's hiding himself right now.
Hello?
Who is it?
Hello?
Hey, how's it going?
WW, Wally Wingert here. How are you, everybody? Nice to see you.
How's it going, Molly? How are you?
How are you? I got my snacks. I got my banana Twinkie, and I got my Cool Ranch Doritos, and I'm
ready to go.
Got my Pure Leaf iced tea here, so I'm all good.
Absolutely.
How am I sounding? Am I coming in clear? Can you hear me, Tokyo?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Good.
So, last time you and I spoke was back in like 2014, 15.
Wow.
And I sent you that.
I was 21 years old then.
That was a long time ago. So I sent you that. So for you, those of you who don't know, I have a nonprofit, and we were doing a charity stream, and we were inviting on voice actors. So Wally was so kind to come on and answer some questions to donors and everything. And I remember you told us the riddle of the cigar and the boat.
Oh, yeah. That's the famous Frank Gorshin riddle from the very first 66 Batman TV series.
Yep, exactly.
3 men in a boat with 4 cigarettes and no matches.
They throw it on. They throw it off board.
They throw it overboard and made the boat a cigarette lighter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I remember that was one of the many riddles, and it fits his character. So let's go right into it. So. With that being said, guys, the goal for these interviews is to learn about some of your favorite voice actors, and at the same time, learn about what they do, what are their characters, and some of their advice that they can give to you. So let's talk about Wally. Kind of introduce yourself. Tell us how you got into voice acting. What are some of the notable characters that you've taken on?
Wow, that's
loaded question.
A lot of questions in one question. What was the first part again?
How did you get into voice acting?
I moved to Los Angeles in 1987 to be, like an actor, on-camera actor, I guess. I quickly fell out of love with that because of the lack of imagination exhibited by most of the casting directors. But I have all these characters living in my head that I like to do, and nobody's interested in actually seeing them because they see me that I look a certain way, and it's like, well, with makeup and hair and costuming, you can change that, but they judge you as soon as you walk through the door. So a friend of mine said that he worked one summer as an intern for a neighbor of his who was a voice-over agent. And he said, well, why don't you're a radio DJ, why don't you make a tape and I'll send it over to him. So he did, and I got signed, and then I just fell in love with voiceover right away because it was more conducive to my multiple personality disorder. So I could be like a squirrel in a garbage can and a talking witch and a muscle man all in one day, and then you move on to the next session, and now you're a teenage boy and you're a talking bicycle and do some bunny noises. So I'm like, this I really like. This is what you can't do in on camera.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
I got into cartoons, and back when I got into video games, or back when I got into voiceover, video games were known as CD-ROMs. You had to buy the CD and put it in your computer. That was the video game. So we started off with CD-ROMs, and it became video game when all the platforms started. And so this is great. So my dream was to work in every aspect of voiceover, and I'm very blessed to have done that. In promo, narration, show announce, cartoons, video games, commercial announce, all kinds of different things. So virtually every aspect of voiceover I've been able to dabble in at some point in my life, and I feel extremely blessed by that. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Awesome. So kind of coming into, I know you said you kind of came into Hollywood, you were trying to do some more on camera, based work for TV shows, movies. So going in, voice acting didn't occur to you until you realized, you wanted that more creativity there for yourself.
Well, I always loved cartoons, and my very first word, I think, was pipe-eye, because I love pipe-eye.
Oh, Olive, I've got to find me spinach. Okay, Brutus.
So I always loved Popeye. So I always loved watching cartoons as a kid, and I noticed in the credits that some of the names of the actors were actors that I had seen in TV shows like Larry Storch and Howard Morris and different things. I'm like, so they do both? This is kind of blowing my mind. So once I got out here and did a couple of on-camera auditions, I said, yeah, this is kind of stupid. So I was like, man, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then a friend of mine suggested voiceover thing. I said, cartoons, of course. This is
of course I want to do that.
Yeah, as a cartoonist and as a cartoon fan and a cartoon historian and now voice actor, I was like, well, that's everything. That's everything to me. So
yeah. And
some voiceover jobs actually encompass singing as well, session singing. So I get to do some of that. So it's a really charmed life, and it probably affords me more creative freedom than I ever would have had I gone into the on-camera world. I don't mind
absolutely.
I don't mind the on-camera world. It's kind of fun sometimes, and I've done commercials and I've done some stuff on TV, and it's fun and it's fine, but it's not where my heart really lies. My heart really will probably always lie in the field of voiceover, because I started off as a radio DJ when I was 16, and you know, I would do my regular radio show, and now it's Pablo Cruz with What You Gonna Do on 1420 KABR. But I would also throw in little interview things during the breaks with different character voices, and you know, and now here's Chewbacca the Wookiee, you know, and I
just chime on in with it, you know, interviewing with yourself.
I would, yeah. I'd pre-record an interview with Darth Vader, and I'd have the Darth Vader responses on a little cart, and I could just hit a button, and he'd come back, and I'd have my script, and it was pretty cool. So I'd already done a fair amount of character voices in my radio show, so it was just kind of a natural progression when I got out here, just to kind of move on into cartoons and voiceover and things like that. So yeah, pretty fun.
Absolutely. Really, really cool. I love all the experience you have there. And that's actually a good question. So do you feel that, you know, when you go into the recording booth and, you know, you're working with people, do you feel that you have a good amount of the creative freedom over how the voice will sound? Or do you feel like there's a little bit of a direction? It's kind of like a relay, like, hey, how does this sound? How does this sound? And kind of that bounce back and forth.
Well, most of that happens in the audition process. They don't cast you unless they hear something that they like. They may do some little tweaks once you get in. And sometimes you're lucky enough to get a job called a gimme, where you don't have to audition. They just give it to you because they know your work, and they say, oh, this is a character that, you know, Steve could do, or that Bob could do, or that Harry could do. Or we'll bring Wally in. This is kind of in his wheelhouse. So my agent will call and say, are you booked on something? I'm like, did I audition for that? No, it's a gimme. I'm like, oh, sure, cool, fine. So I go in and they say, so what are we doing, guys? What's happening? Well, here's the character, and they might show me a couple of drawings or something, and they say, well, he's from the same world as this character here that was voiced by Billy last week. So if you can make it sound similar to that, because they all have to sound like they're in kind of the same world, but different, as a different guy, but still the same kind of, you know, speech pattern or whatever. So that's when the creative process happens on the fly. But ordinarily, if they hear your audition and they like what you did, they'll just bring you in and do that. And sometimes I'll forget, and I'll go in and say, what did I do for this again? And they go, oh, here's your audition. And then they'll play the actual audition that I had sent them.
And you're like, oh yeah, that was me. Exactly.
Yep.
So, but before we kind of dive into some of those experiences, right? Some of those auditions, some of those characters, you know, why don't you tell some of the viewers, like, who are you most notable for? Like, if someone would be like, oh, that's that guy, like, who would you be?
Well, it depends on who you are. If you're into video games, you probably know me as the Riddler from the Arkham series. If you're into cartoons, you probably know me from Invader Zim as Almighty Tallest Red. Welcome, brave Arkan soldier. Or Family Guy. Hey, Phineas, there's a baby in this trash can. And let's see, if you're an anime fan, probably know me as Renji from Bleach. Any number of other characters, or maybe if you're an old fan of the Jay Leno Tonight Show, you know, it's the Tonight Show with Jay Leno.
Oh, wow.
I was there for a while. So yeah, all kinds of different things. So people know me for different things. It's really kind of funny. Even like the Power Ranger fans will know me as the voice of the Blue Psycho Ranger, which is a job I spent maybe 3 days doing back in the late 90s. But, you know, everybody loves those Psycho Rangers, and they love the voices, and they love to have all the actors who provided the voices together again. So That's kind of fun. So it just depends on kind of who you are. I'm known for a lot of different stuff. Cartoons, like the Garfield Show, John Arbuckle, Hey, Garfield, it's time for some lasagna. Where are you going? So that's kind of fun. So, yeah, it just depends on what you grew up on, what you have been watching. Of course, all the Garfield shows are on Netflix now, I think. Invader Zim is on Nicktoons. And, of course, we just did a movie last year called Enter the Florpus, which broke the internet.
Oh, yes, definitely.
So, yeah.
We're very excited for that.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So it's just a mishmash of different things. You'll hear me in Disneyland and Disney World and the Pirates Ride, or you'll hear all kinds of different stuff. But sometimes you'll hear me, narrating things on the E channel, or doing used to do promos on the PAX TV network. So it's like I said, it's a little mishmash of all kinds of
absolutely, all different types of media. So no matter where you look, you'll be somewhere then.
Right. A lot of people like the Avengers: Earth's Mightiest Heroes series. A lot of people regard that as probably one of the better Marvel series of all time. And I got to play Ant-Man and Hank Pym and MODOK and Yellow Jacket in that. And that was 52 glorious episodes of a lot of fun with a lot of really good people.
Yeah.
And I missed that show dearly.
Yeah, no, that was definitely a good show. I actually, the first time I heard you was on that show.
Oh.
So it was on that show, as well as the your introduction into Sonic Boom and
that's
Cubot.
another one too. Yeah.
So that was the first time, and the Riddler. So it's so funny sometimes when you're just curious, you're looking up, and like, oh, I wonder who this guy voices. And you're like, oh, he also voiced this person, and it's, before you know it, it's like your entire childhood broken down, and so it's very funny how it gets
nice,
shaped.
yeah. That's
and
great.
That's actually interesting. So how do you how do you feel a lot of the times where I'm going to kind of pick the Power Ranger part of that, where that's something you only did for a few days, it wasn't like a long time commitment or anything. Like, what do you think it is that I guess when you're involved on a show or a series like that for a short amount of time, that fans immediately are like, wow, and it just clicks to them, where they kind of develops that cult following? Like, where do you think that comes from for you as a voice actor?
Yeah, well, the Power Rangers was an amazing franchise to step into anyway.
Sure.
Right around that particular time. So I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. I've done a voice on a Transformers cartoon, and now I'm on a Power Ranger show. That's pretty awesome. So they came back on another one of the series. The Psycho Rangers were actually resurrected. So we did do another series a little bit later, but again, just another couple of appearances. But the fact that those episodes and those characters have still lived on after all this time, and now they've just come out with action figures of these characters. It's like, well, better late than never, I guess. 20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of missed the mark on that, right?
But the fan base kept it alive and kept the bug in the toy companies. When are you going to release the Psycho Rangers? When are you going to release the Psycho Rangers? And I think the first one they released was the red one, and they're like, all right, where's the other ones? Because there was 5 Psycho Rangers. There was a red, blue, pink, yellow, black, I think. Yeah, and yeah. And it was, they wanted to have them all, and they were completionists, and that's what they're doing now. So it's pretty great to be involved in a franchise like that and see that it's still,
still kicking and going.
Still kicking, yeah. But it's a real kick as a lifelong Batman fan since I was 5 years old, loving the Adam West show, to not only have found my way into the Batman folklore now as kind of carved out my own little place in that, but also to play like a second version of the Riddler in the last 2 animated films that Adam West did, Return of the Cape Crusaders and Batman vs. Two-Face, where I got to actually be the Frank Gorshin Riddler, and I actually got to be King Tut, so two villains from the show from my childhood. So that was pretty great. So now I'm not only one Riddler in the folklore, but I'm 2 Riddlers, and it just blows my mind as a fan. And nobody gets into this business because they hate it. You get into this business because you love it. You become a contractor because you love cutting wood and measuring and creating things and building. And you don't do it because you'd rather be a plumber, but you have to build houses, to make money. It's you get into voiceover because you really, really, truly love this.
Sure.
And whenever there's any kind of strike or anything going on with the on-camera community, I always get all kinds of calls from people saying, "Hey, I want to get into voiceover."
Can you squeeze me in?
Yeah. Now, is this a part-time job? You just kind of like something to bridge the gap until the contract gets settled? Or, yeah, I just want like, this is not
for you.
That kind of job. This is a career, and you're competing against career, voice people. Now you got all the celebrities, getting into it, thinking that they're voice actors all of a sudden, and they're relegating the real voice actors to the additional voices part of the credits, which is a real insult, considering that they paid $20 million to some on-camera actor who probably gave them a lot of attitude anyway, and actually really didn't do all that good a job. It's like,
all am I supposed to do is read the lines?
Anybody could have done what this guy did or what this girl did, but because they're the name, from some TV series, that's why they do that. But then you get other cases like Craig T. Nelson as Mr. Incredible, who is terrific. Billy Crystal and
Mark Hamill is a good one too.
Mark Hamill, yeah. But Billy Crystal as Mike Wazowski, really, really great, and John Goodman as Sully. That's those were good choices. But just to pop a celebrity in a role just because they need the market value, the marquee value, is kind of stupid. Yeah. And I think they're kind of seeing that now, where they've put a lot of money into certain movies with using celebrities, and they just didn't really do that well. And they're like, well, the celebrities really didn't. The name of the celebrity didn't really do much to sell this movie. The movie's either going to suck or it's going to be good.
Yeah, and then they realize that afterwards, right? They're like, maybe this wasn't that great idea.
Yeah, but I've been told countless times by voice directors, producers, all kinds of people. They're like, it's not our choice to work with the on-camera people. We'd rather work with the trained voice actors because they come in, they do it. We don't have to shout much, and off they go, and we got some good takes. We don't like working with on-camera actors, but it's the marketing department that says, no, you have to work with this person because we need the the marquee value. So hopefully that's a fad that will go away soon. I think another couple of really awful movies that tank with a huge celebrity cast will probably show them that maybe better just hire some decent actors who fit the role as opposed to try and squeeze some celebrity in just for the sake of.
Yeah, exactly. It's for the sake of some name recognition,
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times when, some of these movies that are marketed, they're marketed to, they're marketed to kids, teens. They don't really care going in. They don't care who the actor is, behind.
And so it really blows my mind when they do movies, big screen feature film movies of characters that people have come to love, and then they change the voices. And you go into the theater going, well, that's not the voice of blah blah blah. That doesn't sound really right, because I'm used to seeing the TV show and the voices sound a certain way on the TV show. That this is all wrong. Why is this way? So the kids are like, I don't get it.
Like, what is this exactly?
Yeah, what is this? Yeah. So that's kind of misguided, I think. But it's their money, it's their property. They can do what they want. If they want to screw the pooch, let them. If they want to. So, when they do the SpongeBob movie, who do they get? They get the cast of SpongeBob to come in and do it. They get Tom and Roger and all the people.
Sure.
And it sounds like the character. There's consistency. But it's just weird to me. It's like, we're going to do a Mickey Mouse movie, but we're not going to use the voice of Mickey Mouse. We're going to use Justin Timberlake, just because he comes on, he sounds like Justin Timberlake doing Mickey Mouse. I'm just creating this out of my head.
Yeah, of course, I got you.
But you get the analogy of like how ridiculous it is. Well,
no, it definitely is. Are you a? I'm not sure if you're the South Park fan at all, but there was a whole instance I remember back in the '90s. I was watching an interview about it when they were casting the movie, when they had their bigger, longer, and uncut movie, and they said one of their biggest things that they were butting heads with Paramount was, they sat down, they went in, and they introduced them to this whole team of people, and they were like, yeah, so, we're going to help you write the movie. And they were like, okay. And they're like, so we're going to cast Kid Rock in the movie to sing a song for you guys. And they're like, this isn't what we're about. Like, this is not our show. And it really boils down to, I think when it comes down to like, Hollywood and how they interact with, a franchise, they get it. And no matter how it is, like if it's in the best of shape or worst of shape or whichever, they get it. And they're like, we can do better. Like that's always like the first, initial reaction or like, we could change this.
Right.
And that always upsets me because I feel like, I think people take franchises and they kind of, mix it to a point where it's almost unrecognizable.
Yeah.
But there's so many other characters. Like I always think about this, like there's so many other characters that people can take from like a DC or Marvel that aren't really well established and, or not as super popular as they should be. And then they can reinvent them, as much as they want. Like, for instance, like the Black Panther was a good example, of that in my opinion, where, Black Panther wasn't huge in the public eye, but then they built it up. They made a big movie about it. They pushed it, and they're able to put as much imagination in it as possible,
right,
and not kind of botch it. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's what bothers me about remakes is like some movies just don't need to be remade. They're perfect the way they are. There's nothing that you can do with your thumbprint to make this movie any more perfect. I think we're seeing that now with the way a lot of remakes and reboots are bombing horribly. So the fans just don't want to see it. It's like, you know what? I got this movie, the original, on DVD, on Blu-ray. I'll just watch that. I don't need
exactly. I don't need to watch
this.
I
need to pay $19 to go into a movie theater and another $30 for food and $10 for parking and blow, $50 and walk out of there and go, well, that was stupid. Let's go watch the original. That's much better.
Oh, so
yeah. I don't understand why they need to do that, but whatever.
A lot of the times, whenever I watch a remake of a movie or something, there's never really a remake where I was like, wow, that was really good. Like I can't really think of one in specific, but every time I watch one, I'm watching it with someone, I just go, yeah, but we just should watch the original. It just makes me get angry because I just want to watch the original movie in the first place, So, but
I agree. There's really there's not much room in my universe for reboots and remakes. But
absolutely, yeah. So let's get into I want to kind of talk about one thing that you mentioned on Batman, right? So one thing that I find interesting is that a lot of the times when I talk to voice actors or just watch interviews with people talking about their roles or whatnot, a very common question is they'll be like, hey, were you a fan of enter series name XYZ here before getting into it, right? And a lot of times people are like, oh, not really, or I stepped into it, or I learned about it going along the way. So it's actually cool to hear that you were like a big fan of Batman growing up, from 5-6 years old, and then kind of stepping into the Riddler. And I can see it in the background, and that's proof, guys, in the back.
That's the man right there.
That's him.
The guy that got me into everything in more ways than one.
Yeah.
Adam West. I grew up watching Adam West when I was a kid, and it was all the rage. And watching that show in 1966 showed me that I really want to be someone else. I want to pretend to be someone else for a while, and not just on Halloween. So I had my little Batman mask and cape set, and I was running around the neighborhood playing Batman. So that was my first conscious decision that, hey, I can pretend to be other people, and then, maybe I can do something with this. And then I watched The Munsters on TV, and I saw a kid right around my age, maybe a little older, 4 or 5 years older than me. And he was dressed up in kind of werewolf makeup, and he had pointy ears, and he was hanging out with Frankenstein and Dracula and this creepy lady. And it was like, now that looks fun to me. I'd like to do that. I want to dress up like that and be. So, and then somebody said at that particular time, the thing that changed my whole perspective on it, because I thought people just went on TV because it was fun. Like, no, it's fun. I want to go on TV. And anybody just showed up and they put you on TV. And somebody said the thing that changed my life was, well, he gets paid to do that.
And you're just like, what?
What? You give you money and you get to be on TV? This is fantastic.
I can do my Popeye voice and get paid for it. Yeah.
So that's what I knew what I wanted to do. So I knew I wanted to move out to Los Angeles probably from the age of 5. And it took me, 26 years of my life to get here. But, once I'm here, I'm like, well, I'm going to do it now because I can't possibly imagine myself really doing anything else. I really can't. Really am not very good at anything else to even do anything. So yeah, it's just one of those things. But then, I met Adam during a radio interview in my Falls, South Dakota. I was friends with Adam West for 37 years. And I met him in 1980 when he came to town. and told him what my aspirations were as a radio DJ. I interviewed him.
That must have been super surreal and cool.
It was really surreal and cool, and that's like, wow, I'm hanging out with Batman. This is really great.
Yeah.
And he was very, very kind and very forthcoming with all of the information. I was, 19 at the time, and I had all kinds of questions about, hey, I want to be an actor. How do I do it? I want to be blah, 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 blah. And he was real good and always took me seriously. And we stayed in touch, gave me his number, and we stayed in touch over the years. And then I moved out here in '87, right around the time that he left LA and moved to Ketchum, Idaho. And, but we still stayed in touch. And then we got cast on Family Guy together. And I would see him from time to time when he came to LA. But when we both got cast on Family Guy, that was like, well, now I'm not just a radio DJ chasing around my Hollywood, hero. Now we're like equals in a show.
Yeah, exactly. Now we're working together.
Yeah, when the credits come up at the end and it's all alphabetical, it says Adam West, Wally Wingert, which I have a picture of, a screenshot up in my room that I look at every day. So it was pretty great, and Adam always had the greatest attitude about it, because he was asked, he's like, well, you knew Wally before you worked on. Yes, I discovered Wally in a small village in South Dakota. I said, you have to come to Hollywood, and he did, and he became. So Adam was, accepting full credit for all the time.
That's so funny.
Getting to be in his final 2 animated films was just a dream to beat all dreams. So
yeah, talk about. I mean, it's one of those. When people have like their vision boards and like they kind of build out like what they want to do, what they want to be, and like that must be so cool. Like to meet Adam West and on a radio show, and then getting linked with him on Family Guy, and then like there you are, with him. And it sounds like he was definitely a big inspiration and helped you along your way throughout Hollywood and everything.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I met him in 1980 at the World of Wheels car show. He was in his Batman costume, which wasn't really in good shape by that time. And there were people, laughing at him behind his back. Adam West, whether like has been, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. And I was like, what are you talking about? That's Batman. That's Adam West.
Yeah.
He's a huge star. What are you laughing at? So, there was a period of time where he was, kind of a joke. But then he, resurrected the whole thing and became an icon. Which is, there's like, star, superstar, legend, icon.
Yeah.
And he achieved, by the time he passed away, he had achieved icon status. And not everybody can do that. So when he, walked onto the stage at the San Diego Comic-Con to promote the Batman 66 Blu-ray set, and got a standing ovation from 12,000 people in Hall H, I almost had to wipe a tear out of my eye, thinking, yeah, I was there when people were laughing at him behind his back, and now they're all standing on their feet trying to get to him. And now they finally get what I always saw in him as an unsung comedic genius, because his sense of humor was so dry, delightfully so, that sometimes people just didn't even really realize he was joking. But he had such a great sense of humor. Like, he would be at an autograph show, and people would be nervous to come up and meet him, and I'd sometimes hang out with him and watch him work with the people. And but he was so dry that people would take him seriously. So there was a guy who came up and then, talked to him, and then he would go off and come back and get back in line and come to talk to Adam. And he'd go, oh, Mr. West, I'm back to ask you another question. And Adam would just sit back and go, you again? And it was so funny. And the guy's like, is that okay? And I was like, yeah, that's fine. But yeah, so dry. And,
that's great.
It was.
What are you doing back here?
When I was Beetlejuice at Universal Studios Hollywood, I knew that Adam was in town, and I said, Adam, I can get you a pass to Universal. Come in and see my show. So he kind of stood in the back, because this was 94 to 98. So this is 95. He wasn't really an icon yet. He was just kind of on his way back. Everybody kind of recognized him, but he wasn't a huge superstar.
Sure. It was just, he was from, the Batman show, and
so he was
great
at
assault.
Universal. Right, exactly. So he's at Universal, and he's watching the show, and then he came backstage afterwards, and my friend Rob was also there. And Rob knew that Adam was coming to the show, so he brought a lobby card of the Batman 66 movie. And he's up in the dressing room, and he's like, hey, Adam, could I have you sign this lobby card? And he looks at the lobby card, and he goes, now, do you know how much this will be worth if I sign this to the general collecting community. And Rob's like, oh. And I said, Adam, just sign the frickin' thing.
Yeah, just sign the card.
And he goes, okay.
That's hysterical.
Like, how dare you speak to Adam like that? Because I knew that he was joking. And we always had a great sense of humor where he'd be at a convention and I'd be there walking around. And he'd say some funny line that nobody would get, but I'd laugh and we'd do this kind of thing to each other, like.
Yeah, I know what you know, exactly.
He thought it'd be great to do a character because he knew I was into Andy Kaufman. And he said, we all know that Andy died of lung cancer. He probably coughed a fair amount of times in his life. So I want to come up with a character called And He Coughed Man. I'm like, that's brilliant. That's great. But his mind was always working, and he was just so funny. And now I think people, after his work on Family Guy, are finally starting to realize that he was pretty much a comedic genius.
Sure, exactly.
But they just needed somebody like in Batman. They just needed the right writers for him to really capitalize on his sense of humor. So
yeah, exactly. Because I think sometimes, you know, I hear this kind of often is, you know, sometimes you write for the character and that might not work for the voice actor, or sometimes, you know, when you finally get to know the person and how they fit the role and where to build off on their character, then you get to really shine. So, so how do you kind of go and piggybacking off of Adam West? And, you know, that's so awesome that you guys had that, you know, that relationship and everything, and, you know, stepping into Batman and kind of, you know, realizing one of your childhood dreams, right? Like, be like, oh, wow, that must have been, you know, super, super like surreal. Like, I'm here, I made it, I'm the Riddler now. So what were some things that, you know, just like Batman and the Batman series has been around for forever now, you know, there's so many different iterations and variations of it. So going into the Riddler and, you know, the Arkham games, what were some things you wanted to keep on the character and then also kind of build and be creative on for the character?
Well, they had real specific directions on what they wanted out of this character, because in the first game he wasn't seen. You just heard him in some interview tapes.
Yeah.
And they said the main direction was he cannot sound like Mark's Joker, because there's already so much confusion about Joker, Riddler. Oh, that's the Joker. No, it's the Riddler. Oh, that's the Riddler. No, it's the Joker. So they said it has to be completely far away from Mark's Joker. We're thinking about more, since he leads Batman. He loves to lead Batman through traps and stuff. More of like a demented kind of game show host. So I was like, oh, that's kind of an interesting take on the whole thing, because it's a video game and that's, you know, what he would do. So they were talking about in the future games that they would have his lair and he'd be talking on monitors to Batman and trying to guide him through these mazes and these different things. So I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. So I just kind of combined two what they call hybridized two voices, prototypes that I had always kind of enjoyed. One, it was a fairly famous actor from the 60s, and the other was a guy I knew from the Midwest, who loved listening to himself talk and would chew on his words. If I combine the self-importance of the guy I knew, along with the absolute delight that he's getting out of these purely evil and wicked things, like this actor that I modeled him on, if I combine those two, I think I'd have a pretty good thing. So when I'll never forget the day when the agent called and said, well, you're booked on the Batman game, you're the Riddler. And I'm like,
you're like, oh yes, I did it. I'm the what?
that's one of those days where you just never forget, you know, where you were, and you know. So it was pretty awesome. And then
now, would you consider that, you know, was that like your first like big role into something, or did you have, you know, many other, I guess we'll call it, you know, breaks before that, or is that one that stands out to you the most?
Well, Tallest Red on Invader Zim was probably the first one where I was an actual, as opposed to, you know, voicing a character in an anime or like a previously existing character like the Blue Psycho Ranger, you know, the Transformer. Those were all voiced originally by other guys overseas in Japan or whatever. But as I recall, Tallest Red in Invader Zim was the first character where I could say, no, that's mine. That's me. That's me.
Like, yeah, I left the impression on.
Yeah, and when the toy came out, I was like, that's me. I don't have to say that's me and some other guy in Japan who also voiced it.
Yeah.
This is me.
I own this character, yeah.
That was pretty cool. So then after that, there was a few more. But as far as the video games, because I've done a lot of characters in video games, but no real lead characters. I mean, I've done a few, but as far as the Arkham franchise, which is $1 billion franchise, that was pretty big. That was
the Arkham franchise is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It always makes me wonder why they don't do a movie, animated, that looks like the video games. That whole thing, because that would be great looking.
No, absolutely. It's so crazy. And I know I don't want to get too much into the movie side of things on DC, but the difference in quality from like some of the live action stuff to the end, like the animated stuff is like very like well made, taken care of, very groomed. And, those are the Arkham games are so like top of the line,
right.
Clean graphics and everything. Like, yeah. I understand the point where, it might, the graphics, and it might be too expensive to make. So I get that. But, having look at the latest, the Spider-Verse movie that they made about 2 years ago. That was the first animated Spider-Man superhero movie that was kind of unheard of as far as like on the big screen in recent years as far as like a main superhero. So like I'm sure they could do something similar with Batman, and that would definitely draw a crowd. Arkham has a great story. The whole Arkham origin to Night to Asylum. It's really great in City. Great story. Right. So it
was the trilogy that ended up being like a 6-part thing instead.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I wanted to say. I was like, it was a trilogy, and I'm like, no, there's a couple more games in there now.
Yeah, because they realized how good it was. Like, well, maybe we don't want to tether ourselves to.
We don't want to end it. Yeah. So that was funny. Where I know in that game, one of the things I always laugh at was, in the end of City, that's when they kill off the Joker. And then the next couple games, I was like, I'm sure the writers were in the room like, why did we do that? Why did we do that? Why did we do that? Because they were expecting it to end, So it was it's a great series. So
but those writers were fantastic, and they kept coming up with great stuff. And the way they'd write, at least the Riddler lines, were so amazing that sometimes we'd have to stop the session and look up certain words because we didn't know what they meant. Mm-hmm. And I would stop and I'd say, Amanda, what's obsequious? What does that even mean?
That's funny.
Stop the session, Google it, and then, okay.
I'm on the same page as you guys. Yeah. Well, what were some like, just from your view, like what were some of your favorite lines? I'm sure there's tons of them, but was there anything that like really stood out to you?
I always liked how utterly, utterly expected, because you put such venom in a line like that. And like
Venom, and like the Riddler's very like smug, and he's very like spiteful, and
exactly. Which in the very first game, they ask him about like cutting up a baby or something, and the interviewer's like, Eddie, how can you say that? And he goes, easy, it's not my baby. Like, wow, this guy's weird. So, but it's great, great writing. So there's just everything he says is just full of venom and smug, and I love it. And sometimes he'll, get into those dark places because something will hit him, and he'll. So that was a really good direction from Colette Sunderman, who did directed the first game.
Sure.
Sometimes he'd be merry and happy to be doing what he's doing, chewing on his words. Sometimes he'd just get mad, and then he'd go into those dark places, So it's pretty fun. It's a great character, and I'll do it as much as anybody, ever asked me to do it. I'll never turn that down.
Sure.
I'm like Hamill. Hamill will be like, I'll take any Joker job anytime. Just ask me. I don't care what the money is.
I'm there.
I'm there. I just want to preserve the integrity of the character, and so it's pretty great.
Yeah, and something about it too is like I know you were saying before where hey, I did some voice on Transformers. I did this voice here on Power Rangers, but like this is me and this guy. But, for the Riddler, now that you bring it up, you were saying like, hey, prior to this, like we don't want him to be, reflective of the Joker. And I, from my personal experience, just from being a Batman fan and everything, leading into the Arkham games, that's kind of what it was. Riddler was almost like a character where he kind of came in. I'm like, well, what did we do with him? Does he tests, he has set up some traps for Batman, and then that's it. And I do feel like you can kind of see like a pivot on, I kind of see this almost with, the Suicide Squad with Harley Quinn, where all of a sudden, like, this movie comes out and then all the character models and everything moving forward is based off of that. And I can kind of see the same thing with the Riddler, where, once you kind of step to that role and maybe help make that distinction between like, hey, this is what this character is about, this is what this character is about, that's kind of led the way of where people are like, I get it. He's that game show host and he's,
right.
Very demented in that side. So
yeah. But
that's
not,
awesome.
Not insane in the way the Joker is.
Yeah.
He's still demented and prideful. He's, got some points he wants to make.
Yeah, he's more like strategic and he enjoys the game. And
crazy. Joker's just out of his mind nuts. But Riddler is more, methodical, and he has a definite point he wants to make, that he's the smartest guy in the room, but he knows that Batman's actually smarter, but he has to constant struggle to try and prove that he's actually smarter than Batman.
He's the one.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, that's the whole thing. And I don't know how he finds the time to build these crazy traps and do all this stuff. And it's like, where do you find the time to build all this stuff?
Yeah.
It's crazy, like a thing where the Batmobile's racing through, and it's great. But hey, you know what? It's a world of fantasy, so it's fantastic.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's kind of, that might be a good little bit of a segue into some of the things that you did in Invader Zim, where, a little bit almost as an opposite approach, right? Where kind of going into the Riddler, like there was some material that you kind of had play off of, but you, at the same time, you want to make it your own, right? So going into that show, that was just a character that you haven't, played, that no one's voiced him before. So what was like your inspiration to be like, hey, this is how I want to do this? Or what was the direction given to you there?
Well, I remember reading for a bunch of other characters. And I think I was originally cast as Purple, and the guy that was cast as Red decided to move to New York.
Wow, okay.
And this is back before anybody was doing, Zoom or Source Connect or any of that stuff. So it says, well, you're leaving LA, we have to recast. So that's when they got Kevin to be Purple, and then they moved me to Red, because they said, well, the guy that we cast had kind of a New York accent. He had a thing, and it was, kind of smarmy. And I said, well, I don't necessarily equate a New York accent with smarmy, but I think I can do the smarmy. So playing against Kevin was fun because he was completely a different type. His voice was way up here, like trying to do kind of a nasally, wow, he's nice, like come on in, said the spider to the fly. So always that oily kind of slippery voice, like, well, Zim. So it all kind of worked. And Jonan Vasquez always had pretty much of a clear idea what he wanted, even though I think a couple of people had done the voice of Invader Zim before Richard. I believe that Billy West did for sure. And then they might have had Tom Kenny try it, but Horvitz, is that character.
Sure.
And he yells and screams and has that great voice of his. And so it just all kind of came together. They captured lightning in a bottle, and that's not easy to do. So yeah,
and then kind of fast forward to, today recently I should say, that movie came out, and as you said, like everyone was really excited about that. And so how did it feel kind of coming back into the role after all those years?
Well, I always thought that the series ended too soon anyway. There was a couple of reasons for that. One is the show was testing high with tweens, and I think Nickelodeon at the time didn't necessarily want that demographic, because they wanted 5-year-olds that they could sell Pop-Tarts to.
Sure.
True.
The show was edgier to be on, Nickelodeon, yeah.
So they're like, well, and then 9/11 happened, and here's a show where you have a lot of buildings like being destroyed and burning down, and lasers and fights and all kinds of chaos. and they said, yeah, now's probably a pretty good time to cut this off.
To shut it off, yeah.
So it ended a little too prematurely for my taste anyway. So when I heard about the film, I was like, yeah, well, good. Now there'll be some closure.
Mm.
But I think Netflix, needs to do another series because that time's right for it.
Sure.
Definitely the demographic who grew up on Zim is now, older and they're into the Netflix thing. And I think that that would be the next logical thing because the movie did really well.
Yeah.
They did a survey or something of the top animated events of 2019. And the sixth most important one, according to this survey, was Enter the Florpus. They beat, Disney things out, and they beat other, Cartoon Network stuff out. So that's pretty good. So if Netflix doesn't maybe get a series going based off of that data, something's really wrong. I guess maybe they don't want the money or something that they would make.
Sure. Come on, Netflix. What are you waiting for?
Yeah, what are you waiting for?
Exactly. Read the fine print, Because number beat out the Disney movies. Let's do it. And then it's funny you mentioned that. I mean, I totally agree with you because you were saying before where, Nickelodeon, they saw that demographic of tweens and like, we don't know if we want this.
And then they built a network a couple of years later called
Teen Nick, yeah. You're like, what's going on?
Yeah. But the thing, and I said this at the San Diego Comic-Con when we did the Zim panel in 2018, and I said, the reason you have shows like Adventure Time and shows that are kind of cutting edge now, that are kind of edgy, is because Invader Zim basically broke the wall down and blazed the trail. And had there not been an Invader Zim that took those chances, and and Ren and Stimpy to some extent too did that. But I think Invader,
but not to the extent of Invader Zim, because I remember, I mean, cartoons. When I saw Invader Zim, at least on TV, cartoons were very, hey, these are for kids and everything, kind of moving in, and in some respect that there are cartoons that still are, obviously, but I remember like Invader Zim was a show on Nickelodeon that like it felt out of place. Only because, and I do feel that if it was on another network or something, it would have had a much longer lifespan, because if it was on anywhere else, like it could have grown. And you're right, it definitely was like, hey, this is a really edgy cartoon. Teens can enjoy it, the teens to 20s can kind of enjoy it. And that's kind of why you see like such a boom in all these new cartoons, and just like Adventure Time and Regular Show and so forth. Yeah. So.
Yeah, but they owe a debt of gratitude, I think, to Jonah and Invader Zim for taking that first step.
Yeah.
And have them going, oh, well, now we can do this, which seemingly, before Zim, in the age of BZ, never get away with this. But Zim kind of blazed the trail, and well, let's try this and let's be a little wacky.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Hey, how's it going, everyone? Thank you for watching part 1 of our 2-part Wally Wingert voice acting interview. If you want to watch part 2, click the card now for more stories about the Riddler, Adam West, and Cubot. Thank you.